Good morning and welcome to AEO's Micro Business Spotlight series. Today we're joined by Alex Forrester, the founder and COO of Rising Tide Capital. Rising Tide Capital is based in Jersey City, New Jersey, and is one of the great micro business service providers in the country. They focus on intensive business management skills training for aspiring entrepreneurs and current business owners from underserved populations and communities. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Tell us briefly about your motivation for starting Rising Tide.
Well, we started Rising Tide Capital about 10 years ago in 2004, and there were a number of different factors that came into play for our motivation, but certainly one of the most important things was, on one side, the work of Dr. Muhammad Yunus and his pioneering work. His autobiography, Banker to the Poor, was an extremely influential book for us. But on a personal level, my wife was born in Ethiopia. Her mom came to this country as a refugee and started a micro business and used the funds from that micro business to eventually reunite with her daughter. So when we pursue our work at Rising Tide Capital, in many ways we're inspired by a very, very tangible understanding of the transformative power of even the smallest of businesses to have an impact that can span generations. It makes a difference to invest in micro. They have impacts in families that are tremendous. So that was really our motivation, was to find out how we could invest in more people like my wife's mother and see how we could have an impact in many families' lives.
I'm sure that personal story keeps on driving you towards your mission and passion as well, so that must be great to motivate you to keep doing the great work. And tell us a few things, whether it's operations or process-wise, or what you're doing at Rising Tide that's really allowing you to see success in local communities today.
I think we've learned so much from our colleagues over the years in the industry, other members of the AEO. I think that one of the most important lessons that we learned and that we've really focused on over the years has been a focus not just on how to write a business plan, but how to manage a business. Business management skills training is where Rising Tide Capital is really focused its efforts on, and we believe that that's one of the really most impactful types of investments that you can make on the technical assistance side, is not just to help somebody write a plan so that they can get a loan, but to invest in their ability to run and grow that business over the years and then access financing at the right time.
Very interesting. And so recently you attended a congressional briefing hosted by AEO about a micro capital task force, so kind of a cross sector of players that's looking to make policy recommendations as well as come up with new ideas or scale great ideas that are currently going on in the industry. Senator Cantwell, chair of the Senate Small Business Committee, gave remarks about ways to increase capital and to help micro business grow. What did you learn about, I guess, a little bit about the task force, but also about the momentum that's really building on Capitol Hill with Senator Cantwell's help as well as other folks in the policy arena?
I think my overall feeling was a lot of excitement and a lot of pride over the role that the AEO has been able to play on a national level as the voice of micro, really pushing this vision and this agenda forward in a way that is gaining a lot of traction. One of the most important concepts that we need to focus on with our entrepreneurs at Rising Tide Capital is the concept of a target market and a niche. And one of the problems that I think has been an issue in the national small business industry, small business development industry, is that small businesses can at times be defined to include hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. And there's a difference. That is still a small business, but there's a difference between the resources and the types of interventions that can really create impact for small businesses at that level versus small businesses who may just have one employee or 5 employees. So a one-size-fits-all solution is really not the most impactful way to pursue this vision. And what I think is really exciting about the roundtable and about the work that the AEO is doing is this pursuit of a very, very focused set of resources and services that can have an impact on the micro enterprise segment of the entrepreneurial market. That's where we're really going to have a lot of impact, and it's really exciting to see other people seeing that message and getting behind it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with a few things there, but specifically about the one size fits all, and you know the difference between a sole proprietorship versus 500 employees is night and day, and the fact that they're grouped together in a lot of ways is sometimes allows for less impact. So I think that is something that's great that the momentum is happening on the Hill now. Following that briefing, there was actually a congressional hearing, a report, and a bill released specifically focused on women's business ownership. And hearing the bill both spoke at length about the critical role that training technical assistance plays in the success of a business owner. Being that this is Rising Tide's sweet spot, how is this either encouraging or different than what you've seen happening previously with legislation and with policy work on the Hill?
Well, I think that there were a number of really important recommendations that were made as part of this effort, and I know that some of it had to do with removing some restrictions on pre and post technical assistance, which I think is just good public policy. We need to focus on the outcomes and on the impact, and not necessarily micromanage what the process for generating those outcomes should be. So removing those regulations, I think, is really smart. Another one of the recommendations that I'm aware of had to do with removing a cap on the use of third-party technical assistance providers by the lenders, and I think that's also a very exciting recommendation, because one of the things that Rising Tide Capital had to do very early on in its life was choose between whether it wanted to be an educational services institution or a financial services institution. While there are organizations out there that do both and do it well, we looked at it and decided that the bottom line dynamics of those two different types of initiatives were different enough that we wanted to focus our efforts on one of them and then partner with the others. And so Rising Tide Capital focuses exclusively on the education side of our field. We partner with a number of lending partners. The use of third-party technical assistance providers, which I guess would refer to somebody like Rising Tide Capital, I think goes towards a vision that we have of where the national industry hopefully would go, which is one that is integrated so closely on the back end that the end entrepreneur who's benefiting from these services has a seamless experience, but leaving organizations like Rising Tide Capital and lenders to really focus with a laser-like kind of emphasis on excellence on specifically their part of the work. And so we dream of a world that goes beyond referrals and an integrated industry on the back end. So I think that these kinds of recommendations push us towards that vision.
That reminds me of back to college days when you were doing case studies and you always found what the core competency was, and that's how you kind of focus on improving performance across your organization and figure out where you fit into the grand scheme of things, but really focusing on that competency. So it sounds like Rising Tide's found that sweet spot and you found what really works for you, and you're expanding those services. I think lastly, there was a track at the AEO conference, 2014 conference in New Orleans, called Reimagining Technical Assistance. A few of the topics covered were how to put an end to the loan decline letter. We know that there's 8,000 loans declined by a bank every day, which is one of the motivations to start the Micro Capital Task Force. And also technology-led models for business development services. How do you see technical assistance changing to reach more people in a more effective and efficient manner? Is it using technology? Are there other ways to scale and innovate? Where do you see kind of technical assistance moving towards in the near future?
I think when it comes to technology, most people think about front end technology, the types of distribution channels that make content available, and certainly those are extremely valuable avenues to pursue. But sometimes the role of technology on the back end gets ignored. Now, maybe I'm looking at this from the biased perspective of a chief operations officer, but I tend to look at the ways in which technology can create functionality and enhanced operational ability for organizations to create impact and to collaborate, just as I was saying before in terms of collaboration between lenders and TA providers. Technology can really facilitate that in a way that that goes beyond what's possible without it. So I think that where we can really focus on certainly would be the ways in which technology can enhance the interactions with our entrepreneurs, but it can also be used to focus on how to avoid putting in place a one-size-fits-all solution, even within our target market, even within our industry niche, because within the hundreds or thousands and millions of micro-entrepreneurs that are out there in America right now that the different organizations in our industry are working with, there are differences. There are a diversity of needs and levels of where people are at and what would be most helpful there. Technology can help organizations to create targeted, granular services based on those shared needs. And I think that that's really where we can focus on to enhance our impact in a cost-effective way. So I get very excited about that. I look at what's going on in the mainstream education field and the way that they're beginning to use systems like badging systems to create journeys through an educational experience that may be very complicated with many different parts, but to use technology to guide somebody through in a way that can be customized and yet still manageable from an organization's perspective. So I get very excited about the way that technology can be used, but sometimes it may be different than what it initially appears.
Sure, I think that was some great insight, and to me as well, I think the journey of starting or from an idea to actually a business plan, I mean, badging kind of makes perfect sense there, right? So bringing that up is something that I'm sure either yourself and others are exploring. I'm also excited on bringing new ways and innovative ways to serve the audience that we really care about at the end of the day, is the underserved entrepreneurs and business owners. So I think that there are a lot of positive signs that we're moving forward in the right direction, and collaboration and integration are definitely helping with that as well. Any last words of advice for your colleagues out there?
Advice? No, I think just the fact that it is the AEO that is able to focus our efforts as one voice in the ways that can influence policy and decisions making that is impacting not just our organizations but our entrepreneurs. And so I think that the more that we can leverage the research that the AEO is doing, like the power of 1 in 3, and some of the reimagining TA and the recommendations, it really makes a difference to be involved in the ecosystem around us and not just on our own organization. So I certainly see that happening every year at the conference and throughout the year. And so I think no advice, just a very, very hearty, let's keep going. This is really exciting times to be in this industry.
Well, again, thank you, Alex, for your time, the kind words. And yes, voices like yours are what make AEO's voice. It's not our unique voice, it's the voice of our entire network and membership that really does help influence policy as well as other initiatives. So we do appreciate your support and your continued participation at our conference and in other events that we put on throughout the year. So thanks for your time, your support, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex.